Lee Min-ho is a young boss. He sits in his office on the top floor of a high-rise building. Outside, the evening light of Seoul is slowly fading. Min-ho doesn't raise his voice. He never shouts. He simply watches. His gaze is dark and calm, but the people in front of him fidget nervously. Right now, the man who made a mistake in the reports stands in front of his desk. The man is trembling. "You let the team down," Min-ho says quietly. "Because of you, we lost a client." The man tries to justify himself, his words slurring. Min-ho listens silently, then nods slowly. That nod is enough. Two other men in formal suits take the offender by the arms and gently but firmly lead him out of the office. The door closes. Min-ho turns to the window. His business is large and complex. He owns nightclubs, freight transport, several restaurants. Everything runs like clockwork, and Min-ho's watch is expensive and precise. He keeps track of everything. He knows that strength lies not in shouting, but in action. Everyone knows. If Min-ho says something, it must be done. Otherwise, there will be problems. Big problems. He's young, but he already has gray hair at his temples. He works hard. He's respected. He's feared. For him, it's all the same. Min-ho has a meeting the next morning. A new computer security specialist is arriving. The old one had an accident and is now unable to work. A girl enters the office. It's Eleni. She's tall with dark chocolate-colored skin. Her hair is braided in intricate plaits. She doesn't look scared. "Sit down," Min-ho says. She sits down. She speaks pure Korean, but with a slight accent. Her resume is impressive. Top U.S. universities, work with major companies. "Why are you here?" he asks, his gaze searching hers. "I'm interested in new challenges. Your company is growing rapidly. You have complex tasks," she replies, her eyes looking directly at him. Min-ho gives her a test task. His laptop has security software. He asks her to find its vulnerabilities. Eleni takes her tablet, her fingers quickly running across the screen. 20 minutes later, she hands the laptop back. On the screen is a list of 5 vulnerabilities that even his people weren't aware of. Min-ho looks at the list, then at her, a spark of interest appearing in his eyes. "You're hired," he says. "You start tomorrow. You'll be shown to your office." Eleni nods and thanks. Her face is calm. When she leaves, Min-ho looks over her resume again. Everything is too perfect, but she is talented, and he needs talent. Eleni leaves the building. She walks down a busy street and enters a small coffee shop on the next block. She gets a cappuccino and sits by the window. Only now does her hands begin to shake slightly. She takes out a simple phone and dials a number. The call connects after 3 rings. "I'm inside," she says quietly. There's a few seconds of silence on the other end of the line. "Okay, remember the terms. You work for us for a year. You pass on everything you learn about Min-ho's affairs, his contracts, partners, financial flows. Then we'll forgive your brother's debt. If you refuse or let us down," the voice on the other end fades, and that's more terrifying than any words. "Your brother will have an accident. Understood?" "I see," Eleni whispers. Her brother is in New York. He's in trouble. Deeply in debt. Now his fate is in her hands. "First task," the voice continues, "find out who's in charge of Min-ho's deliveries through the port of Incheon. Names, schedules. You have a week." The connection is lost. Eleni places the phone on the table. She looks at her reflection in the darkened coffee shop window. She has just entered a world from which there may be no escape, but she has no choice. She finishes her coffee, gets up, and walks back to her new home, Elle and Min-ho's cold glass tower. Eleni spends her first few weeks working in the general department. She's quiet, focused, and does her job flawlessly. The reports she prepares are always clear. She resolves system issues that others have struggled with quickly and silently. Min-ho watches her. He watches the footage from the security cameras in the common room. Eleni doesn't waste time talking to her colleagues. She doesn't scroll through social media. She works. Her attention is always on the screen. One morning, his own encryption system for internal communications malfunctions. Everyone's nerves are on edge, and negotiations with important partners are at risk. Technicians are scrambling, but they can't find the cause. Min-ho leaves the office. The common room is silent, broken only by the clicking of keys. He approaches Eleni's desk. "Do you understand this?" He nods towards the monitor, where an error is flashing. Eleni looks at the screen, then at him. "I can try. I need access to the main server." Min-ho looks at her for a moment, then nods to his IT boss. "Give her access. Full access." Eleni sits down at a separate terminal. Her fingers fly across the keyboard. She doesn't say a word, only occasionally asking for a file. After 40 minutes, she leans back in her chair. "Done. The problem was with the update line. I rolled it back and set up a temporary barrier. The system is working, but the entire defense needs to be reviewed. There are some weak points." Min-ho looks at the screen. Messages coming and going. The crisis is over. He looks at Eleni. There's no pride in her eyes, only the weariness of concentration. From now on, You'll work directly for me, Minho says quietly, so only they can hear. Your office will be next to mine. You'll be responsible for all digital security, and my personal security too. The room freezes. This promotion is incredible. A leap over dozens of steps. Alani simply nods. Okay, thank you for your trust. Don't let me down, Minho says, and the words are not a request, but a warning. Alani's new office is a small but private room with a glass door that opens onto Minho's reception area. They see each other almost constantly now. Minho begins assigning her more and more tasks. At first, these are purely technical ones, checking the security of negotiations, setting up secure channels, analyzing competitors' digital footprints. Then he asks her to attend meetings, simply sit with a tablet, and ensure no one is recording or connecting to the network. She's silent, but not invisible. Her presence is noticeable. She sees how Minho works. She sees his cold calculation, his ability to pressure people without shouting. She sees how they fear him, but sometimes when the meeting is over and everyone leaves, he leans back in his chair, closes his eyes for a few seconds, and a look of weariness appears on his face. Real weariness. In those moments, he looks simply like a young man who's been given too much to bear. One day, a meeting with suppliers from the provinces drags on until late in the evening. Minho leaves the meeting room, and Alani follows him with documents. Are you still here? He asks, taking off his jacket. Your workday ended 5 hours ago. I was waiting to give you the final report on their network security. You asked for it by today. She hands over the tablet. Minho looks at the document, then at her. Are you always this pedantic? When my job depends on it, yes. The corner of his mouth twitches slightly. It's almost a smile. Are you hungry? He asks suddenly. Alani looks at him in surprise. I didn't think about that. Me too. But it's worth eating. Let's go. He takes her not to a fancy restaurant, but to a small establishment in a nearby alley. The owner, an elderly Korean man, nods silently to Minho and leads them into a private room with a mat on the floor and a low table. They eat spicy stew and drink iced tea. They talk little about work, about technology. Minho asks her opinion on new encryption systems. He listens attentively to her answers. For him, this is not idle chatter. He absorbs the information. Then he suddenly asks, "Aren't you afraid to work here?" Alani freezes, chopsticks in hand. What do you mean? Everyone here is afraid of me, and they should be, but you aren't. Why? She slowly puts down the chopsticks. I'm not afraid of people. I'm afraid of making a mistake in the code that will ruin everything. It's an understandable fear. You can work with it. Minho looks at her with a long, searching gaze. Then he nods, as if he's received an important answer. After dinner, his driver takes Ilani home. She sits in the back seat and looks out at the city lights. She was supposed to gather information about this dinner for the Bayeko clan, but she won't do it. It was something personal, and her job is purely business. That's what she tells herself. Now they often stay together after work. Sometimes it's working dinners, sometimes just tea in his office after everyone else has left. Their conversations become more inclusive. He asks about her life in America. She tells him cautiously, omitting details about her family and her brother's debts. He talks a little about his childhood, about the strict father who built this business. One night, they're working on an urgent project. Ilani is searching for a data leak. Minho sits nearby, reading reports. The office is quiet, save for the hum of the air conditioner and the clicking of her keys. She finds a trace, another IP address connected to the server. She shows it to him. Minho frowns. This is serious. Can you figure it out? He asks, leaning toward her monitor. They sit very close. She smells his clothes, expensive cotton, and the light, cool scent of soap. She freezes for a second. Ilani? His voice was quiet, right next to her ear. She looks away from the screen and meets his eyes. He doesn't look at her like a boss looks at an employee. His gaze is different, heavy, attentive, lingering on her lips, then returning to her eyes. There's tension in the air, thick, almost palpable. She's the first to look away, feeling her heart pounding. Yes, I'll figure it out. Give me an hour. Minho slowly moves away. Okay, I'll be in my office. He leaves, but the feeling of his closeness remains. Eleni spends the next hour trying to concentrate on her work, but her thoughts return to that look. Something has changed between them since then. Their glances linger. The occasional touches, when he hands her a folder, when she points to something on her tablet, become noticeable. They seem to charge the air with static electricity. A week later, a turning point occurs. It's late evening. Heavy rain falls outside. Ilani finishes the report and goes into his office to sign it. He stands by the window, looking out at the wet city. She puts the folder on the table. Everything is ready. He doesn't turn around. Look at this. The city from above in the rain. It looks clean. All the dirt is washed down to the ground. She approaches and stops nearby. At a respectful distance, she looks at the sea of lights dissolving in the streams of water. You can't always wash away everything you need to, she says quietly, minding her own business. Minho turns to face her. His face is sharp in the dim light of the office, but his eyes glow with the reflected light from the street. Sometimes you can try. He takes a step toward her, then another. The distance between them disappears. He slowly raises his hand and touches her cheek. His fingers are warm. Eleni doesn't pull away. She can't. Everything inside her froze, and then exploded with anxiety and desire. This is wrong. This is dangerous. This is destructive. But when he leans in and his lips touch hers, she forgets why. She kisses him back. Her hands find his shoulders without meaning to. Rain beats against the window. The city is drowning in fog, and in the quiet office upstairs, the last barrier between the boss and the one who came to betray him crumbles. After that evening, everything changes. There's more between them now than just work. They don't discuss it out loud, but it's in the air. Minho keeps her late, finds excuses for personal conversations. His touches are no longer casual. Eleni responds, but there's a constant cold knot inside her. She remembers the call from the coffee shop. She remembers the voice on the other end. She has a week to get some initial information. One morning, while Minho is in a meeting, she's alone in her office. She has access to the logistics charts. She opens a file with the Inchinport delivery schedule for the next month. On the screen are the routes, the names of the vessels, the names of those responsible, exactly what they asked for. Eleni stares at the monitor. Her fingers hover over the keyboard. She thinks of Minho, of his hand on her cheek, of the way he looks at her when he thinks she's not looking. Then she thinks about her brother, about his frightened voice in their last conversation, about the debts he will never be able to repay. She takes a deep breath. Her fingers begin typing rapidly. She copies the data, not to a flash drive, but to an encrypted file. Then she visits a seemingly innocuous weather website, a transmission channel. She uploads the file, clicks send. A green checkmark appears on the screen. Done. Eleni leans back in her chair. The room seems quieter. She's just made her first real move. Before, she was just an observer. Now she's an active player, a traitor. She closes all the tabs and opens the security report. Her hands are shaking slightly. She clenches them into fists. 3 days later, the first incident occurs. A truck carrying goods for one of Minho's clubs is stopped at the port exit. It's a routine document check, but the inspectors are surprisingly thorough. They find a discrepancy in the invoices. The shipment is delayed. It's not a disaster, but it does result in losses and a damaged relationship with the supplier. Minho summons the logistics manager. The conversation behind closed doors doesn't last long. The man emerges pale, his hand shaking as he adjusts his tie. Next week, a meeting with a potential partner from Japan falls through. The partner's plane is delayed for a trumped-up reason, and when he finally arrives, he receives an anonymous fax with questionable information about Minho's affairs. The negotiations fall apart. Minho sits in his office in complete darkness. Only the light from the desk lamp illuminates his clenched fists on the desk. Failures are coming one after another. Too precise, too timely. Someone is passing on the information. Someone is inside. He launches an internal investigation. His people discreetly interview employees, check phones, monitor their behavior. Suspicion falls on several mid-level managers who had access to both failed deals. Minho watches them, but it doesn't even cross his mind to check Eleni. She stands apart. She's nearby. She's his refuge from all this noise. In the midst of these problems, Minho trusts Eleni more than anyone else. He begins to discuss with her not only technical issues, but the overall situation. I think someone's transmitting cargo movement data, he says one evening. They're in his office, drinking whiskey. He doesn't look at her, but instead pinches the bridge of his nose. He looks tired. Eleni freezes, glass in hand. The ice clinks. Do you have any suspicions? Yes, but they're not the ones with access to everything. The leak is localized. He takes a sip. I'm already working on it, but I need your help. He says yours instead of yours. This small change cuts her like a blade. Of course. How can I help? Check everyone who had access to these 2 cases, not just the official logs. Look for any strange online activity, even the most minor. Find me a lead. Eleni nods, swallowing the lump in her throat. He's asking her to find her. The irony is so ironic, it makes you want to scream. I'll start tomorrow morning, she says quietly. Thank you. He finally looks at her. The weariness in his eyes gives way to something warmer. Right now, you're the only thing that's working properly here. I can count on you. The words fall on her like a heavy weight. She lowers her eyes so he won't see the guilt and panic in them. I'll do everything I can, she says. And that's the most bitter truth of the evening. She'll do everything she can to save her brother, and that destroys everything else. He trusts her more and more. He begins to talk about his plans for the future, how he wants to change his business, to abandon some of his old, risky schemes. She listens. And every word he trusts comes at an incredible cost. Her task grows more complex with each passing day. It's no longer just data collection. It's a game against a man who is letting her deeper into his life. A game in which she must act as if her heart isn't breaking every time he takes her hand. Feelings come to Alani quietly, like a silent illness. She finds herself searching for his gaze across the crowded meeting room. She finds herself smiling at his dry, caustic joke, which no one else dares even comment on. She remembers how he drinks his Coke. No sugar, just ice. One day, he catches a cold. He doesn't cancel his appointments, but his voice becomes hoarse and dark shadows appear under his eyes. Alani, without a word, places a box of cough syrup and a pack of lozenges on his desk next to his papers. She does this early in the morning, while he's still out. Later, he walks into her office holding the box. Is it you? She nods, not looking up from the screen, as if it were nothing. He stands in the doorway silently, then says simply, "Thank you," and leaves. But for her, that word holds a whole universe. Now her betrayal takes on a new, painful flavor. Before, she was deceiving her boss. Now she's deceiving the man who trusts her. The man whose weariness she sees, whose determination she respects, whose unexpected tenderness she begins to expect. At night, she lies awake. His face is in her head, and right behind it, her brother's. She's torn. Every word Minho says in her presence, she now filters through a double sieve. What can she give to Baeko, us, to make them leave, and what can't, so as not to hurt him too much? This internal struggle exhausts her more than any job. The pressure on the other side is mounting. First, they called once a week. Now, every 3 days. The voice on the other end sounds increasingly less patient. "You're passing crumbs," he hisses. "We don't need a printer paper delivery schedule. We need meat, key items. Otherwise, our interest in your brother might burn out." Alani sits on a park bench, clutching her phone. "I can't just take everything. He'll start checking. I'll get caught. Your problems don't concern us. Do you have access to his finances? To his personal accounts?" "No, only to corporate security systems. He and his accountant have access to financial flows. So find a way, or create one. You have a month. We want to see the structure of his main cash flows, exact numbers, channels. Otherwise, we'll call your brother and tell him how his little sister decided not to help him." The connection breaks. Alani lowers her hand with the phone. A month. She looks at the children playing on the playground. She has a month to find a way to steal Minho's most protected possession, or doom her brother. She returns to the office with a stony face. Minho notices her paleness. "Are you okay? You look tired." "I didn't get enough sleep," she quickly replies. "Everything's fine." He looks at her carefully, but doesn't press. "Go early today. Get some rest." "I can't let my best analyst break down." His concern is another blow. She throws a "thank you" over her shoulder and practically runs to her office, feeling the walls closing in around her. A week later, something unexpected happens. Minho calls her to his office at the end of the day. On his desk lies a small box of dark wood, polished to a shine. "Sit down," he says. He uses an informal form of address, which is rare even in private. She sits down, looking at the box with curiosity. "Tomorrow marks a year since you've been working for me," Minho says. His tone is businesslike, but there's something soft in his eyes. "It's been a difficult year, but you've proven yourself better than anyone. You're reliable, smart, and you're always by my side." Every word falls on her like a stone. "Always on my side. That's why I want you to have this." He slides the box across the table. Alani slowly opens it. Inside, on the black velvet, lies an elegant pen. It's not a simple one. The body is made of dark, almost black wood, inlaid with the finest plates of cold, matte metal. It looks like an artifact, like a thing that will endure for centuries. "It's incredibly beautiful," she breathes. "It's custom made. The wood is a rare species that sinks in water. It symbolizes stability, unsinkability." He pauses, looking at her. "Like you." Alani takes the pen. It's surprisingly heavy and fits perfectly in her hand. She feels a lump in her throat. This gift isn't just an expensive trinket. It's a symbol of trust, a symbol of who he thinks she is, who she isn't. Guilt washes over her in such a thick, hot wave that it takes her breath away for a moment. She can't look at him. She stares at this beautiful, perfect thing in her hand, the hand that, just hours ago, was sending stolen data to his enemies. I don't know what to say. Her voice trembled betrayingly. It's too much. Not for you, he says quietly. Carry it with you. Let it remind you where you belong. Where do you belong? She feels her world splitting into two parts that will never come back together. She grips her pen tightly to keep her hand from shaking and looks up at him with wet eyes. Thank you, Minho. I'll take care of her. She will. But not as a symbol of trust, but as an eternal reminder of the most vile and painful betrayal she ever committed. The pen in her palm feels scorchingly cold. The month is running out. The pressure is reaching its limit. Alani can't take it anymore. Her competitors send her a small, almost weightless voice recorder via deadmail. It's as thin as a plastic card. Minho's next big meeting is about financial flows. We need to hear everything. This is the final task. After this, your brother is free to go, and we'll leave you alone. The final task. These words sound like a promise of liberation. Do this, and the nightmare will end. She will be able to leave. She must do this. She learns that Minho has scheduled an important meeting in his office in 2 days. They will discuss rerouting key cash flows through new, more secure channels. This is exactly what Beko, the heart of its financial system, needs. Alani lies awake at night. She stares at the very pen Minho gave her. It lies on the nightstand, cold and beautiful. She thinks of his hand that gave it to her, of his voice when he said, "Let it remind you where you belong." Her place is in a trap, and to escape, she must commit the greatest betrayal. By morning, she makes the decision. Cold, clear, desperate. She'll do it. She'll record the conversation, hand it over, and disappear forever. It'll be better for everyone. The day of the meeting, Alani dresses in a simple, formal suit. The recorder is tucked into her inside jacket pocket. It feels like a red-hot iron pressed to her chest. She's working in her office, but she can't concentrate. She hears people entering Minho's office. 2. Their voices are muffled. 15 minutes into the meeting, she stands up. Her movements are mechanical. She picks up her tablet from the table, as if she were going to a meeting. Her palms are clammy. She breathes deeply. She steps out into the hallway. The reception area is empty. His secretary has gone off somewhere. This is luck, or a trap. Alani can't tell the difference anymore. She approaches the massive door of Minho's office. Voices can be heard behind it. Minho says something in a calm, even tone. A second voice clarifies something. Alani looks around. No one. She slowly, very slowly, reaches into her pocket. She pulls out a thin tape recorder. Her fingers tremble. She leans the device flat against the wall, right next to the door frame, in the shadow of a large floor vase. The recorder is almost invisible. She presses a barely perceptible button. A tiny red LED lights up for a second, then it goes out. Recording begins. She takes a step back. Now she has to wait. She has to stand guard here, making sure no one accidentally discovers the device. She leans against the opposite wall, holding the tablet in front of her like a shield. She tries to look like she's waiting her turn for a meeting or reviewing documents. Her heart is pounding so loudly, she thinks she can hear it through the door. Every second seems like an eternity. She hears fragments of phrases. Transfer through Hong Kong. Legal cover. By Friday. Every word is a nail in the coffin. Every word is a step toward her brother's freedom. She looks at the door and sees nothing but this dark wooden surface. Behind it is the man who trusted her, and behind it is her own betrayal. Silent and invisible, clinging to the wall. 20 minutes pass. Conversation continues inside. Alani is already beginning to think everything is going according to plan. Another half hour, and the meeting will likely be over. She'll take the recorder and leave. But suddenly the voices outside the door become louder. She hears chairs moving. Minho's voice says, "Seamos," firm and clear. "We'll discuss the rest on Friday. Thanks for stopping by." The meeting ends. Too early. Half an hour earlier than any schedule would have predicted. Alani's breath caught in her throat. Panic, sharp and cold, pierced her. The recorder was still there, by the door. She couldn't reach it now when they were about to leave. The door handle begins to turn. She has no time. None at all. She does the only thing she can. She pushes off the wall and takes 2 quick steps forward, straight to that very vase, as if examining something on a tablet. Her left hand, in one fluid motion, sweeps the recorder off the wall and into her open palm. She instantly clenches it in her fist and puts her hand behind her back. At that very moment, the door swings open. First, 2 men in expensive suits emerge. They nod at her as they walk, without pausing. Then Minho appears in the doorway. He's already turning to close the door when his gaze falls on her. He stops. His eyes look at her, then slide down to her hands. One holds a tablet. The other is clenched into a fist behind her back. "Ilani," he says. His voice is casual, but there's a slight question in it. He didn't expect to see her here, right at his door. She freezes. The recorder feels like a hot coal in her fist behind her back. She can feel every edge of it. Her head is empty and ringing deafeningly. He notices everything. Her frozen posture, her too pale face, her eyes filled with genuine terror that she hadn't managed to hide. And most importantly, her right hand, clasped unnaturally behind her back. His gaze, which a second ago had been simply questioning, changes. Instantly, it becomes sharp, focused, like a laser beam. He slowly lowers his eyes and looks at her clenched fist behind her back. Then he looks up at her face again. He says nothing. The silence in the hallway becomes absolute, oppressive. Alani can't move, can't utter a word. She sees the puzzle unfolding in his eyes. Suspicions that may have been buried somewhere now surface, crystallizing into one terrible, obvious picture. Minho takes a slow, deliberate step forward. He comes so close to her that she can feel the cold tension radiating from him. "What's in your hand, Alani?" His voice is quiet, almost gentle. It makes it even more frightening. She silently moves her lips, trying to say something, to come up with an excuse, but her brain refuses. He doesn't wait for an answer. His hand shoots up and grabs her wrist, the one clenched into a fist behind her back. His grip is iron, leaving no chance for resistance. He forcefully pulls her arm forward. Her fingers unclench in shock and pain. A small, thin black rectangle of a voice recorder falls onto her open, trembling palm. He looks at the recorder, then at her. There's no anger or surprise in his eyes. There's emptiness, an icy, bottomless emptiness. That's the worst thing. He doesn't let go of her wrist. On the contrary, his grip tightens. He abruptly, almost roughly, pulls her along with him, not toward the exit, but back to his office. Alani stumbles, barely able to keep up with his long strides. She doesn't try to break free. All her resistance vanished as the recorder fell into her palm. He pushes her into the office, slamming the door behind them with a sound that forever separates her from her old life. He turns the key. The click of the lock sounds like a death sentence. Only then does he release her hand. She recoils, rubbing her wrist, where red marks from his fingers are already appearing. She stands in the middle of a huge, suddenly alien office. He stops in front of her, blocking the exit. His figure seems enormous. He silently extends his hand, palm up, demanding. He will not wait. With tears in her eyes, unable to bear his gaze, she places the recorder in his palm. He doesn't look at the device. He looks only at her. He presses the play button. His own voices, muffled but clear, come through the small speaker. Transfer via Hong Kong. He immediately stops the recording. That's enough. No further evidence is needed. He throws the recorder on his desk. The sound is muffled, final. He crosses his arms over his chest. His face is a stony mask. "Who?" he asks, a single word. Alani closes her eyes. Everything inside her is crumbling. Fear for her brother, shame, despair, the exhaustion from months of lies. It all rises like a lump in her throat. She can't take it anymore. She can't lie to his face when he looks at her with those empty eyes. "Becco!" she breathes, her voice a strange, strangled whisper. Tears finally break through and stream down her cheeks, but she doesn't even try to brush them away. He doesn't move. He shows no emotion. Why? This question, asked in a flat, cold tone, finishes her off. She sinks into the nearest chair, as if her legs can no longer support her. She buries her face in her hands. The words burst out in spurts, between sobs she can no longer contain. "My brother, in New York, he owed a lot of money, to the wrong people. They said I had to work for them, for a year, pass on information, or else something bad would happen to him," she gasps. "They wanted everything but your finances. I didn't want to. I tried to stall, but they pressured me. This was my last assignment. They said he'd be free after that." She raises her tear-stained face to him. Her eyes reveal not a plea for mercy, but a complete, absolute admission of guilt and despair. "I'm not making excuses. I did everything they asked. Until this." She nods toward the recorder. "I'm sorry." The last word hangs in the air. It is as useless as everything else. Minho doesn't answer. He silently turns away from her and looks out the huge window, where the city lights up in the evening. His back is straight and unassailable. The silence in the office becomes unbearable, filled with the collapse of everything that was between them, and everything she had just destroyed. Eleni wipes her face with the back of her hand, trying to pull herself together. Now that the word Bayeko Nisi has been spoken, there's no point in lying any further. They found me even before I came to your interview. she begins quietly, staring off into space. They knew everything. Where I lived, where I studied, and they knew about my brother Marcus. She pauses, collecting her thoughts. Minho doesn't turn around, doesn't interrupt. He simply listens, his back a motionless block of stone. Marcus, he's not a bad person, just stupid and gullible. He invested all his savings in one scam, and then borrowed more to pay it back. A lot. From bad people. Russians, I think. He was desperate. He called me. Crying. Ilani's voice breaks. And then they called me. They said they'd bought out his debt, that now he owed them, and that there was a way to fix it. She takes a deep breath. I was supposed to get a job with you, tell you everything I learned about your affairs. For a year. Just a year. And then they'd let Marcus go and leave us alone. They said that if I refused or tried to warn you, my brother would be found in the river, or he'd just disappear. She falls silent. The whole story is out. Dirty. Shameful. Devoid of any dignity. She was not a heroine saving her family. She was a weak link, easily manipulated. Minho turns slowly. His face remains impassive, but deep within his dark eyes, black clouds seem to be shifting. The rage within him doesn't rage, but compresses into a dense, red-hot ball. Somewhere within, she feels it as a cold heat emanating from him. He looks at her for several long seconds. He sees her devastation, her tears, her sincerity, and all of this is now just part of the picture of betrayal. That's it? He finally says. One word, sharp as a blade. Ilani nods, unable to speak anymore. Minho presses a button on his desk. A few seconds later, two of his men, the same ones who are always nearby, enter the office without knocking. They stand by the door, awaiting orders. Take her to the room on the 5th floor, the one with the bars on the window. His voice is completely level, without hesitation. No phones. No talking. So she can't go anywhere. Understood? The men boo almost in unison. Got it, boss. One of them approaches Ilani. He doesn't grab her roughly, but his hand on her shoulder is firm and leaves no choice. Come on! She stands up. Her legs are weak. She doesn't resist, doesn't even look at Minho one last time. She allows herself to be led out of the office. The door closes behind her, leaving Minho alone with silence and the recorder on the desk. When he's alone, his composure begins to crack. He abruptly sweeps everything off the table. The recorder, the folders, the expensive pen he once gave her. Everything crashes to the floor. He breathes heavily, clenching his fists. He's been deceived. Not by his competitors. It's all clear with them. She's deceived him. The one he confided his thoughts to. The one he trusted with his safety. The one he let in closer than anyone in years. He feels not only rage, but also a stab of stupid, insulting pain. He'd allowed himself to be weak, and he almost paid for it. Everyone paid for it. Thoughts begin to race in circles. Find and destroy Beko. Deal with her brother. And with herself. The easiest way is to erase the problem. Remove the witness and the traitor. That's how the rules of his world dictate. That's what anyone in his place would do. But he stops. He looks at the mess on the floor. He sees that same pen lying on its side, unsinkable. The irony of the situation burns him. Killing her would simply close the story. It's quick. It's familiar, but it's petty. They'll just find a new weakling, and he'll be left feeling like he's been played like a child. No, this won't do. A cold, calculating thought begins to displace his anger. He sees this story not only as a threat, but also as an opportunity. Ilani is his captive, and her brother is the weak link in the Beko chain. They think they have her on the hook. They don't know the hook is now in his hands. He straightens his jacket, takes a deep breath, and exhales. His face becomes inscrutable again. The anger sinks deep, turning into fuel for something more complex. He won't kill her, at least, not now. He'll make her the key to destroying Beko. They wanted to play spies. He'll show them how to play chess. And he'll start with his main deceiving pawn. The room on the 5th floor resembled an office from which everything unnecessary had been removed. A table, a chair, a sofa. A sturdy metal bar hung over the window. Ilani sat on the edge of the sofa, her arms wrapped around her knees. She wasn't crying. Inside, there was emptiness and a quiet dread of what would happen next. Several hours passed, maybe more. Time lost its meaning. The door opened without a knock. Minho stood in the doorway. He entered alone and closed the door behind him. He looked the same as always. Impeccable suit, cold face. But now there was a dangerous, focused energy in his presence. He didn't sit down. He stopped in the middle of the room and looked at her. Did you give them much? He asked first, in a businesslike tone. Ilani nodded slowly, without looking up. Yes, but not everything I could. I filtered it. He ignored this attempt at some kind of justification. They believe you're still their agent? She nodded again. You have to believe me. I didn't tell them anything about the failure. Minho looked at her appraisingly for a few seconds. Then he took a step forward. I have a proposal. One deal. You listen, then you respond. There is no third option. She finally looked up at him. There was no pity or anger in his eyes, only cold calculation. You will do for me what you did for them, he said clearly. But now you will pass on to them the information I give you, information about my affairs, my weaknesses, my plans. Alani looked at him, not understanding. It will be a lie, he continued. Everything you send them will be a deliberate trap. You will lure them where I need them. You will help me ruin them, destroy them, and wipe them out of my path. He paused, letting the words sink in. If you do this well, if they take the bait and collapse, I'll spare your brother's life. I already know who holds his debt. After Beko is gone, I'll settle this matter. He'll be free, and you can leave. He didn't promise to spare her life. He didn't say he'd forgive her. He spoke only of his brother and the possibility of leaving. That was more than she could hope for now. Through Alani's mind, was this a trap? He wanted to use her and then get rid of her? But even so, did she have a choice? Her only alternative was to stay here, in this room, and await her fate, and Marcus's fate. She thought about Beko, about the voice on the phone, about their threats. They used her without thinking. They put her in a position where she had to ruin the life of a man who treated her like a human being. Guilt towards Minho and a burning hatred for those who dragged her into this mixed together. He wasn't saving her, he was offering her redemption. Dangerous, deadly, but the only one. What if they figure it out? She asked quietly. What if they figure out I'm working for you? Minho replied without hesitation. Your brother will die, and you too. But if they understand, it will mean you made a mistake, and you cannot make mistakes, not even once. He spoke the truth, brutal and clear. Alani exhaled slowly. Her whole life now narrowed down to this one task, to play a double game better than ever, to deceive those who blackmailed her, to save the one she loved, and to, perhaps, wash away, at least a little, the horror she felt looking at the emptiness in his eyes. She raised her head and looked straight at him. I agree. I'll do it. What needs to be done first? Something flickered in his gaze for a second. Maybe satisfaction, maybe something else. He nodded. First, you call them. Tell them the recording was a success, that you have what they wanted, and that you're awaiting further instructions. The rest, I'll tell you. Now they work together, but everything is different. Minho takes her to a regular office on the same floor. It has a computer and a phone, and an unbarred window, but there's always someone behind the door. He lays out papers in front of her. These aren't real documents, but a specially created cover story. They need something big, Minho says. His voice is even, like a surgeon about to operate. Something they can latch onto. It'll be a shipment. Electronic equipment, very expensive. It'll arrive at the warehouse in Incheon on the 10th. Only my people will be there. Minimal security. It will be at night. Alani listens attentively, studying the warehouse layout and access routes. Everything looks very plausible. But this isn't a real warehouse, she says quietly, looking at the plans. No, he confirms. But they won't know about it. You'll give them this information. Tell them I'm personally overseeing this deal, that it's very important. They'll want to interfere. Seize the cargo. Make trouble for me, and then they'll get to where I'm waiting for them. She nods, her mind already analyzing the details, looking for weak spots in the lie they are about to sell. What if they ask why there is so little security? Tell them I'm trying to avoid attention, that the route is secret. They'll believe it because they want to believe it, Minho explains. He's confident in every word. They discuss every detail for another hour. What tone to use in the message, what to emphasize, what to omit. Eleni becomes the co-author of a trap for her former masters. It's a strange and terrifying feeling. The day of the information transfer arrives. Alani sits at the computer. Minho stands against the wall, watching. He gave her strict instructions, but the final say is hers. She must convince. She takes a deep breath and opens a communication channel, that same weather website. She writes a short, business-like message, just like she used to. I have something important. Tonight on the 10th, warehouse number 7, Zone B, Incheon Port. Arrival of high-value special equipment. Minimal escort, route classified. Minho will personally oversee it. This is a major contract. Awaiting instructions. She rereads it. Everything is as they agreed. Urgent enough, tempting enough. She adds figures, fictitious, but impressive sums. Her finger hovers over the send button. This time, she's deliberately sending people into a trap. She's become an active participant, no longer a victim, but a tool. She looks at Minho. He nods silently. Alani presses the key. The message fades into the digital void. A reply doesn't arrive immediately. A whole day passes. Minho says nothing. but his calm is tense. He waits. Alani remains in the same office. She can't eat, only drinks water. Every ring of the phone makes her jump. Late in the evening, the answer comes. Short as always. Information received. Await further instructions. Be in touch on the 10th. She shows the message to Minho. He reads it, and a subtle, cold satisfaction appears on his face, like a fisherman who's caught his first bite. They've taken the bait, he says. They don't ask for clarification. They don't express doubts. They simply accept it and prepare to act. That means they believe. He turns to the window, looking at the city at night. They're greedy. They see an easy target and a chance to strike me. They don't check because they're sure they've got you on the hook. That's their mistake. Eleni listens to him and realizes he's right. The Bayeko don't doubt her. They think she's still their frightened puppet. They don't see that Minho has long held the strings. The trap has sprung. Now we just have to wait until the 10th and watch them walk into it. While Alani waits for the 10th, Minho works on the other part of the plan. He finds out the names of the people in New York who hold her brother's debt. It turns out it's not that difficult. He has connections. He arranges a meeting through trusted contacts. The conversation is short and businesslike. Minho offers an amount that covers the debt and a little extra. He doesn't haggle. He buys. People in New York are initially surprised. They ask why he's doing this. Envoy Minho shrugs. Business interests. Mr. L wants this debt transferred to him. That's all you need to know. The money is transferred. The documents are signed. Now Marcus's debt belongs to Minho, and therefore his fate, too. Minho doesn't tell Alani about this. Not now. She needs to focus on her role. He simply keeps the folder of documents in his safe. It's his trump card, and a guarantee. The 10th arrives. The night is dark. There is fog in the port. Minho and a few of his most trusted men are already there, but not at the warehouse mentioned in the intel. They're in an old abandoned hangar 200 meters away. It's quiet and empty. Alani is in a car nearby, along with one of Minho's men. She can see the tablet screen in front of her. It's transmitting footage from several hidden cameras they've installed around warehouse number 7. They are waiting. Half an hour after midnight, 3 black SUVs pull up onto the deserted road in front of the warehouse. They stop. Men get out. There are a lot of them. About 10. They look confident, ready for action. Among them, Alani recognizes one of the Bayeko gang's lieutenants. She's seen his photo. They quickly surround the warehouse. 2 approach the gate with tools. A minute later, the gate opens. The men enter. On the screen, Alani sees them turning on their flashlights and surveying the empty space. Their faces first reflect concentration, then bewilderment. The warehouse is completely empty. No boxes, no equipment, nothing. One of them, the same assistant, takes out his phone. He starts saying something, his face contorted with anger. He understands. At that moment, the light from their flashlights goes out. Then, powerful spotlights from outside come on, shining directly into the open warehouse doors. The Beko men freeze. Blinded, Minho's voice comes over the speakerphone, calm and clear. Come out one by one, hands behind your heads, quickly. A moment of confusion ensues. Then screams and sounds of struggle come from the warehouse. The Beko men refuse to surrender. They try to break through, to shoot back, but they're trapped. Minho's men have taken up positions all around. There are more of them, and they're prepared. Alani hears muffled sounds through her tablet, short commands, footsteps, a few dull thuds. She can't see any details. The cameras only show the entrance and the perimeter, but from the way the shadows move and the sounds fade, she knows the resistance is quickly fading. 10 minutes later, it's all over. The Beko men emerge from the warehouse with their hands raised. Their faces are pale and angry in the spotlight. They are searched, their hands are tied behind their backs, and they are seated on the ground in a row. The last to emerge from the warehouse is the leader of the Bayeko, Kim Tai-sik. He's old, but he holds himself upright. His face is a mask of rage and contempt. He doesn't look at his men. He stares straight into one of the cameras, as if he senses someone behind it. Minho steps out of the shadows and approaches him. They stand facing each other for a few seconds, not saying a word. Then Minho says something to him quietly, so the microphones don't pick it up. Old man Kim spits at his feet in response. Minho doesn't move. He just looks at him. Then he nods to one of his men. He turns away and walks into the darkness, toward his cars. He no longer looks at what's happening behind him. Alani sees 2 of Minho's men approach Old Man Kim. They take him by the arms and lead him around the corner of the warehouse, out of the cameras' line of sight. At this point, the image from the cameras abruptly ends. Minho's man next to Alani in the car picks up the tablet and turns it off. "It's over," he says simply. We can go back. Alani was returned to the same office on the 5th floor. She sat and stared at the wall. The night passed, then another day. She didn't know what would happen next. She only knew that the leader of Bieko would never call again, ever. Minho arrived that evening. He entered alone, holding a thin folder. He looked calm, like a man who had completed a difficult but necessary task. He sat down across from her and placed the folder on the table. It's all over with Bieko. Their business here is finished, he said simply. Alani nodded. She didn't ask for details. She didn't want to know them. And my brother? She asked quietly. It was the only question that mattered. Minho opened the folder. He pulled out several sheets of paper. They were copies of documents in English and Korean. Debt transfer agreements, IOUs. He handed them to her. I bought his debt from those people in New York. Now he owes me. But that's a formality. Here's the release document. He pointed to the last page with the seals. Your brother is free. No one will look for him. His debt is canceled. Alani took the papers with trembling hands. She read the lines. It was true. Names, amounts, signatures. Her eyes filled with tears. Marcus was free. This was what she had started all this for. And this was what she had almost never dared hope to achieve. She looked up at Minho, her eyes wet with tears. Thank you, she whispered. Again, the words seemed too small for everything that had happened. He didn't respond to her thanks. He simply looked at her, his face unreadable. You did what we agreed on, Minho said evenly. Bejo is gone. You helped me. I freed your brother. Our accounts are even, equal, as if it were simply a business agreement, not a story of betrayal, lies, and mortal danger. He pulled another envelope from his inside jacket pocket and placed it on top of the debt documents. Your passport and a ticket. Flight to New York tomorrow morning. Business class. There's also a new credit card in the envelope. Enough money on it to start a new life. Anywhere but here. Alani looked at the envelope, then at him. And that's it? She asked, unable to believe it. She had expected anything but such pure, cold calculation. That's it, he confirmed. You're leaving. You're forgetting everything that was here. About me, about your work, about Seoul. You're going back to your life, and I'm staying in mine. He stood up. The conversation was over. The car will take you to the airport at 7 in the morning. Everything is already arranged. We will not see each other again. He turned and headed for the door. He didn't look back. He simply walked out, leaving her alone with the documents, the ticket, and the deafening silence that followed his words. The next morning, everything happened exactly as he said. A car. Incheon Airport. She was escorted through a separate entrance, without lines or security checks. She passed security and found herself in the business class lounge. Everything was quiet and sterile. She sat by the huge window and watched her plane prepare for takeoff. In her hand, she clutched her passport and the very same envelope. Inside was a map and a one-way ticket. Her suitcase, modestly packed the night before, had already been checked in. She thought about her brother. She needed to call him as soon as she landed, tell him everything was okay, that he was free. She imagined his relief, his joy. But inside her, there was no joy, no relief. There was emptiness, a dull, echoless emptiness. She felt like someone who had survived a catastrophe. She was alive, whole, even free. But something inside was broken beyond repair. She remembered his face when he said, "Our accounts are equal." There was nothing in his eyes. No hatred, no regret, no warmth. There was only closure. For him, she was a closed case. Her flight was announced. She stood up, adjusted her bag, and took one last look out the window at the gray Seoul sky. She did what she came here for. She saved her brother, and she paid for it with all her being. Now all that's left is a shell, ready to board a plane and fly away. She walked to the boarding gate and handed the flight attendant her ticket. A few minutes later, the plane lifted off from the runway and gained altitude. Seoul, its lights, its skyscrapers, its secrets, and its cold boss remained below, growing smaller and smaller until they disappeared into the clouds. Eleni leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. She was flying towards a freedom she could no longer feel. Minho returned to work. The day after Eleni's departure, everything proceeded as usual. Morning reports, meetings, inspections. His men noticed the change, but didn't dare utter a word. He had become different, not just stern, but completely detached. Before, his coldness had held a sense of energy, of concentration. Now there was silence. He spoke even less, his gaze even more unreadable. He made decisions instantly, without discussion. If before he had been feared for his strength and will, now it was for his icy, soulless calm. It was as if he had frozen out all unnecessary elements, leaving only the purest, ruthless calculation. He no longer lingered in the office after hours unnecessarily. He didn't stare out the window. He arrived, did what needed to be done, and then went to his empty, spotlessly clean penthouse. There, He could sit for hours in complete darkness, motionless. His thoughts were only about business, about schemes, about control. He didn't allow them to wander. Sometimes his gaze would accidentally fall on the chair in his office where she'd sat that evening, confessing everything, or on the spot by the door where he'd found her. He hadn't changed the environment. He'd simply stopped seeing those details. They'd faded, just as she had. He forced himself to believe it. He became more efficient and dangerous than ever. No weaknesses, no personal attachments. He was a machine, and the machine worked flawlessly. 6 months passed. It was November, and a cold, stinging rain was falling outside. Minho was sorting through his evening mail in his office. Most of it was business letters, invoices, reports, and one small cardboard box, unmarked, just his name and office address printed on a plain white label. There was no return address. He weighed it in his hand. Light. He carefully opened it with a box cutter. Inside, nestled in bubble wrap, lay a small, dark wood box. An icy wave, sharp and familiar, ran down his spine even before he opened it, but his hands moved calmly. He flipped the lid open. On the black velvet lay that very same pen, dark, sinking wood, inlaid with cold metal. Unsinkable. No note, no hint of who sent it. Just this object, perfectly polished, cold to the touch. He took it out of the box. It lay in the palm of his hand, just as it had when he had handed it to her. Heavy, perfect, a symbol. He expected anger, resentment, irritation at her reminding him of herself, but that's not what came. Understanding came, deep and merciless. He hadn't forgotten her. He hadn't forgotten her for a second during all these months. He simply meticulously filed away every detail, every memory, every moment in the deepest, most remote corner of his mind, locked it with a heavy padlock, and pretended the box didn't exist. And she, simply returning this gift, tore off the lock with one movement. He remembered her eyes that last night, when they'd plotted against Beko. They held both determination and desperation. He remembered her voice as she'd agreed to the deal. "I'll do it." He remembered the way she'd looked at him when he'd told him their scores were even. Not with relief, but with a kind of endless weariness. He thought he'd erased her, that for her, he was merely a jailer and an instrument of vengeance, to be feared and forgotten. But this gift, returned without words, spoke of something else. It wasn't a reminder of duty or a threat. It was a return of what had been given under different circumstances, a rejection of a symbol that no longer corresponded to the truth. The final chord of their story, struck not by him, but by hers. And in this silent gesture, there was more power and finality than in any revenge. He slowly closed his hand, squeezing the handle. The wood was smooth, the metal cold. He sat there, motionless, for maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour, staring into space as the rain pounded the glass. Then he slowly opened the bottom drawer of his desk, put the box and pen inside, and closed it. The click of the lock echoed in the silence of the office. He stood and walked to the window. The city below was shrouded in a rainy haze, the lights blurring in the wet darkness. He had put everything in its place. He had destroyed the enemies. He had closed the gestalt. He had received back what he had given. But the victory didn't feel like a victory. And the emptiness he had so carefully cultivated all these months was suddenly filled not with silence, but with a clear, indelible memory of the girl who had come to betray him, a Ushisa, leaving a quiet, indelible mark on his world. A mark he would always carry with him, just as he carried this now useless, unsinkable thing in his desk drawer. The rain didn't subside for days. Minho worked, but the sense of detachment he'd so carefully cultivated began to crack. The return of his pen was a click that disrupted the perfectly tuned mechanism. He caught himself involuntarily scanning the room during negotiations, as if searching for someone at the wall with a tablet. The silence in the office, which he'd once treasured, now seemed too loud. He tried to rationalize it away. She'd returned the gift to sever the connection completely, or to spite him, or simply because she didn't want to keep anything of his. Any of these explanations were logical, but they didn't bring the icy calm he was seeking. A week later, he quietly ordered his IT specialist, Alani's successor, to perform a full audit of all our digital systems for the past year. Pay particular attention to the previous specialist's tenure. I need a report on any vulnerabilities she may have left behind, and all traces of external connections. The young programmer, who feared Minho like fire, merely nodded vigorously. Minho told himself it was a sensible security measure. He needed to make sure she hadn't hidden any other surprises besides the information for Beko. This was a business matter. Only business. The report arrived 10 days later. It was voluminous and technical. Minho studied it that evening, and his gaze fell on the sections about hypothetical backdoors and for applications, activity logs. He saw her work schedules. She stayed late almost every day, even before they began a personal relationship. Her activity often peaked after he left. He saw a list of the files she accessed most often. Among the dry security reports was one private, encrypted file named Notes Secure. His specialist wrote next to it, a file with double encryption, created and deleted by user Ilani Rose. Contents cannot be restored. Deleted 10:09, the day before their last conversation. Before the tape recorder, Minho leaned back in his chair. What was she writing down? Her plan for working on Beiko? Or something else? This inaccessible information, this digital ghost, irritated him more than any direct evidence of guilt. It was a hole in the picture he thought was complete. He closed the report. It didn't matter. She was gone. The file was deleted. End of story. But that night he couldn't sleep again. One thought kept running through his head. She was writing something down for herself, something that wasn't meant for him or for Beiko. The next blow came from an unexpected quarter. 3 weeks after the dispatch, one of his men, overseeing foreign relations, brought unpleasant news. An old story resurfaced. A minor but persistent official from the port administration, whom Minho had convinced to cooperate a year ago, was becoming nervous. People were coming to him with questions about certain operations involving the name of the defeated Beiko clan. The official was afraid of being drawn into the investigation. "Who's interested?" Minho asked, his voice even. "It's not clear yet. Not the police, private individuals, perhaps connected to the remnants of that structure, or journalists. Reassure him with money, and find out who these curious people are." The investigation progressed, but Minho realized he'd made one mistake. Having destroyed the top brass of Beiko, he hadn't completely uprooted the structure. Those left behind were disgruntled, out of work, and penniless. The snake had been decapitated, but its tail was still twitching, and now that tail was looking for weakness, searching for information, the very information Eleni had been passing on to them. They could try to track her down, or use old data to harm him. His plan for revenge was as precise as a shot to the head, but he hadn't foreseen the scuffle on the ground after the body fell. Eleni was part of this unaccounted chaos. She knew too much, for him and for them. The thought that they might come for Eleni took root in his mind, quietly but firmly. At first, it was a cold statement of fact. She was the weak link. Then, irritation. He'd let her go too cleanly, leaving her a living witness who could now become a problem. Finally, through these layers of rationality, something else, sharp and unpleasant, broke through. Something like responsibility. He was the one who dragged her into this war. He gave her the tools for revenge and sent her away, but he didn't ensure her future safety. He smashed the cage she was in, but released her into the forest, where wolves still prowled, no longer useful to them. Beiko report. He saw a transfer. It was small, to a private detective agency in the United States. The request had been made by a frontman, but his people traced the source of the money to one of Kim Tae-sik's former assistants, a survivor of the showdown. The request to the agency was worded simply, "Find a woman." A sparse description and a name were included. Ilani Rose. The ice in his chest cracked. This was no longer an abstract threat. This was a concrete step. Minho wasn't a man of doubt, but his next decision was a difficult one. It didn't fit into the logic of either revenge or business. It was personal, and he'd banished personal decisions from his life 6 months ago. He summoned Park Jin-sung, his oldest and most loyal man, the one who always carried out the most delicate tasks. "We need to find someone," Minho said when they were alone. "In the U.S. A girl." Ilani Rose. Puck, whose stony face rarely revealed anything, raised an eyebrow slightly. He knew the whole story. He was the one who had taken her to that very room on the 5th floor. "To fix the problem?" Puck asked in his raspy voice. Minho looked at him. The question was logical. It would be the logical step, the final one. Minho answered after a pause. "To make sure the problem hadn't found her first, and to fix this other problem, carefully, quietly." Puck nodded without asking any more questions. If the boss said no noise and no cleaning, then that's how it had to be. He turned to leave. "Jin-sung," Minho stopped him. The man turned around. "She can't know it's me. Ever. Understood? It's clear." When Park left, Minho felt a strange weariness. He was letting her back into his life. Not her herself, but her shadow. Her safety is a problem. He wasn't acting out of weakness, he told himself. He was simply cleaning up the aftermath of his own plan, really completing the gestalt, so that nothing would remind him of that story anymore. Not her, not her potential problems, but deep down, in the very place where the understanding had come with the pen in his palm, he knew he was lying to himself. While Park was quietly investigating, Minho acquired another piece of the puzzles. His men, digging into Baeko's affairs, stumbled upon an archive of financial records. Among them was a vague entry about payments to an external consultant, marked NY debt. The amount wasn't what Alani had mentioned. It was 1.5 times larger. Minho summoned the person negotiating the ransom for her brother's debt. "Are you sure you handed over the full amount they demanded?" "Absolutely, boss. We paid exactly the amount on the final invoice." "Where did they get the original amount from? Did you check?" The messenger looked a little confused. "No, they named a figure. We didn't haggle, just like you told us." Minho let him go. The thought was brewing, dark and unpleasant. He'd ordered an investigation through his overseas channels, not of his brother's debt, but of what had started it all, the scam he'd invested in. The answer came 2 days later. Yes, such a pyramid scheme existed. It collapsed, leaving hundreds of victims. But the amount Alani's brother lost was significantly less than the amount he was later credited with by the people who bought out the debt. The difference was precisely the one that surfaced in the Baeko recordings. The picture that emerged was repulsive in its simplicity. The Baekos didn't simply find a weak spot, they created one. Most likely, they themselves were connected to those same Russian loan sharks, or they set up the brother, deliberately luring him into a trap so they could later gain leverage over the talented hacker they had already eyed for infiltrating him. They didn't buy out the existing debt. They fabricated it. So Alani wasn't just a blackmailed victim from the start. She was a pawn in a game she didn't even understand. Her guilt toward her brother, her despair, it was all carefully orchestrated. This information didn't change anything about what she'd done. Betrayal was still betrayal, but it cast a different, even dirtier and more tragic light on it. She hadn't simply made a deal with the enemy to save her family. She'd been forced into this deal after her life had been destroyed. The Minho felt not cold rage, but something else, a bitter, almost pitiful understanding. He and Alani, each in their own way, were victims of the same calculation. Only he had emerged victorious, while she had been broken and exiled. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out a box containing a pen. He held it in his hands. Unsinkable. The irony was now triple. They were both trying not to drown, and both, in a sense, had failed. Puck returned a month later. He entered the office, silently placed a thin folder in front of Minho, and took a step back. "We found her quickly. She wasn't hiding," Puck began in his monotone voice. "She lives in a small town in Oregon. She works remotely for a mid-sized IT company. She lives alone. She rents a house. She leads a quiet life. She has no connections to the outside world." Minho opened the folder. Inside were several blurry photographs taken from a distance. Alani was leaving the store with a bag of groceries. She was sitting on the veranda of her house with her laptop. She was dressed simply, in jeans and a sweater. Her face in the photos was calm but empty, just as devastated as he had last seen her at the airport. "An agency hired by the Baeko people picked up her trail a week ago," Park continued. "They've been monitoring her. They seem to be gathering information, but haven't taken any active action yet." Minho slowly closed the folder. "And what did you do?" "I contacted our contacts in the area, people unrelated to our main case. I made it clear to the owner of that detective agency that further attention to this individual would be very detrimental to his health and business. The agency suspended its activities this morning. The threat has been neutralized." Minho nodded. Park had done everything precisely, cleanly, and according to orders. The threat had been eliminated. The gestalt had been closed. Now it was certain. She didn't suspect anything? No. Our people were operating 2 levels above those clowns. "Okay, thank you, that's all." Pak bowed and left. Minho was left alone with the folder on his desk. He had done what he believed necessary. He had protected her from the threat he had ultimately created by starting this war. He had corrected his mistake. Now the score was truly clear. He should have thrown the folder away. Erase all traces. Instead, he opened it again and pulled out a single photograph, the one where she was sitting on the veranda, wrapped in a blanket, looking off into the distance, beyond the frame. Her pose held a familiar weariness and detachment. He put the photograph back, closed the folder, and put it away, not in the desk drawer, but in his personal safe, next to the documents on her brother's debt. He hadn't forgotten her, and now that he knew the full story and saw her empty eyes in the photograph, he began to understand that perhaps he hadn't wanted to forget, because oblivion is the privilege of the innocent, and he was guilty, not of betraying her, but of becoming part of the machine that had ground her up. And that pen in the drawer, that photograph in the safe, they weren't souvenirs, but proof of the price they both had paid. A price he now carried with him silently, like his own personal, indelible brand.